In 1930, John G. Neihardt was working on his final narrative poem related to the Messianic dream and the variety of apparent messiahs who emerged among a number of Native American tribes for roughly 100 years, which ended with the Wounded Creek Massacre in South Dakota in 1890. John traveled to the Pine Ridge Reservation searching for an old medicine man who had witnessed and influenced no small part of that messianic movement. His search landed him before the old Sioux holy man of the Oglala Lakota, known as Black Elk. This man, now in his late 60s, was second cousin to the world-famous Crazy Horse, and a first-hand witness to the ghost dance religion founded by the Paiute prophet Wovoka. Though it was an unlikely affair that Black Elk would finally speak to John through an interpreter about his life, his many mystical visions, battles, and travels, the world is all the better that in May of 1931 he shared his epic story to, quote, save his great vision for men. To prepare for the story, many pine trees were set up around Black Elk's log cabin, and a sacred teepee decorated in spiritual symbols was stood up for the occasion. The talks began shortly after breakfast each day. Black Elk was not telling the story of a great hunter or a great warrior, though he had fought many battles in his time as a boy and a man, and had traveled among the distant lands of men, even making a trip across the Atlantic for roughly 2 years as a part of Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. Beginning, Black Elk said, quote, "It is the story of all life that is holy and is good to tell, and of us two-leggeds sharing in it, with the four-leggeds and the wings of the air and all green things. For these are children of one mother, and their father is one spirit." He first tells about how the first smoking pipe came to his people from a beautiful woman who was very young and came out of a fragrant white cloud to give the pipe to their chief. And in honor of the Great Spirit, Black Elk lights his own pipe before telling the story, making his offering, saying, quote, "Grandfather, Great Spirit, you have been always, and before you no one has been. There is no other one to pray to but you. You yourself, everything that you see, everything has been made by you. The star nations all over the universe you have finished. The 4 quarters of the earth you have finished." The 1800s were a time of cultural upheaval and a kind of religious chaos for many tribes who were foreseeing the doom of their people and an end to their way of life. Black Elk's father once had told him of a Lakota man who prophesied the destruction of their way with the coming of the white man, the Washichus. Quote, "When this happens, you shall live in square gray houses in a barren land, and beside those square gray houses you shall starve." Black Elk recalls seeing his father return home with a broken leg from fighting and killing so many Washichus. And as a boy he'd endured many cold winters and strange sights foretelling the coming changes. He remembers when his grandfather gave him his first bow at 5 years old, and he rode out through the woods to see a kingbird sitting on a branch. He nearly shot and killed the bird when it spoke to him, telling him of the clouds and to listen as a voice was calling him. Black Elk looks up to the northern clouds to find 2 men coming down out of them, singing a sacred song. But when they got close, they wheeled back to the east and departed, leaving rain and a great wind in their wake. Black Elk told no one of the vision from fear, though he enjoyed thinking of it. But in the summer of his 9th year, the voices came to him when he was out by himself and rarely, and one day, while he was eating in a friend's teepee, a clear, loud voice came to him, saying, "It is time, now they are calling you." Black Elk jumps up and heads out, suddenly feeling as if he was waking from a dream, and his legs were aching. The next day, when he dismounted his horse, he crumpled to his knees, unable to walk. He became gravely sick and swollen all over, his face puffed up. Next time they made camp, he was lying on his back with his parents around him, and out through the opening of his teepee he sees the 2 men from his previous vision coming out of the clouds, head first and slanted down. And carrying spears with lightning trailing them, they told him to come. "Your grandfathers are calling you." And this time the little cloud took him up, and he was rising, and as he was rising, he looked down to his mother and father below. He was lifted light and free into the world of cloud, where they were piled like mountains. He sees then a beautiful horse, who begins to speak to him, telling Black Elk he would see the horse's life story, and that of the 12 black horses who appeared in the distance with manes of lightning. At every cardinal point were 12 horses of different breeds, and he was told, "Your grandfathers are having a council. These shall take you, so have courage." In the sky there was then a terrible storm of horses of every hue, shaking the world with thunder. In every part of the sky were dancing, neighing horses. And at the beckoning of the one bay horse speaking to him, the two of them marched together until the mass of sky horses morphed into animals of every kind, and a tepee with a door of rainbows opened up before him, where 6 men sat in a row. The 6 grandfathers, who were older than any men could ever be, old like the hills and stars. The 6 grandfathers were the powers of the north, south, east, west, of sky and earth. The first one tells him of the thunder beings to the west, who will give Black Elk the power and take him to the high center of the earth, to the place where the sun continually shines. Quote, "They shall take you there to understand." And when he spoke of understanding, Black Elk says, "I looked up and saw the rainbow leap with flames of many colors over me. Now there was a wooden cup in his hand, and it was full of water, and in the water was the sky. Take this," he said. "It is the power to make live, and it is yours." Now he had a bow in his hands. "Take this," he said. "It is the power to destroy, and it is yours." And the grandfathers each gave Black Elk a different herb, power, or pipe, singing songs foretelling the great aid Black Elk would be to his people. And when the 5th and eldest grandfather spoke as the spirit of the sky, he said, "My boy, I've sent for you, and you have come. My power you shall see." He stretched out his arms and transformed into a hovering spotted eagle. "Behold, all the wings of the air shall come to you, and they and the winds and the stars shall be like relatives. You shall go across the earth with my power." After the eagle soared over, the sky became filled with friendly wings coming toward him. Before the 6th grandfather, the spirit of the earth, spoke, Black Elk is sure he knew him. And this old man, representing the spirit, aged backwards into a boy. Black Elk says, "I knew that he was myself with all the years that would be mine at last. When he was old again, he said, 'My boy, have courage, for my power shall be yours, and you shall need it, for your nation on the earth will have great troubles. Come.'" Now Black Elk found himself riding eastward on the first horse who'd spoken to him. This was a fearful road, and all below him the earth seemed sick, and the hills and the grasses and animals cried in fear. Quote, "I was the chief of all the heavens riding there, and when I looked behind me, all the 12 black horses reared and plunged and thundered, and their manes and tails were whirling hail, and their nostrils snorted lightning. He came above a place where 3 streams converged into a source of mighty waters, where flames rose and a blue man lived. Here around this blue man, the grass and trees withered, and the animals were weak and the birds unable to fly. All the legions of horses dove down to kill the blue man, but failed, calling on Black Elk to finish it. Quote, "And all the world was filled with voices of all kinds that cheered me, so I charged. And using the tools given by the grandfathers, he stabbed the blue man's heart with a spear of lightning, and thunder rolled with many voices crying, 'Unhe,' meaning he had killed. After the blue man died, the rain brought gladness to the trees and grasses and all living things. Next he saw his people depicted as a mourning village nation, where women and children laid with the dead, just as the dead would lay after the Wounded Knee massacre. But wherever he rode, he checked behind him, and everything had changed into gladness and relief after he came through, and a voice told him he had been given the center of the nation's hoop to make it live. He beholds many ascensions and difficulties taken by his people, and many among them had different visions and followed their own rules, bringing even the winds at odds. He is shown a sacred herb that should come to his people in the time when the buffalo depart, and great whirlwinds of smoke and screams foretell of a mighty suffering to come. As he rode on his spirit horse, he hears the calls for healing from people below, and he rides in a circle above a sick horse which he revives using the 4-rayed herb. In this spirit world he encounters 4 virgins who were, quote, "more beautiful than women of the earth can be. They came from each quarter of the earth, and the universe went silent to behold a great song, foretelling the dance of horses from every part of the world. There was nothing that did not hear, and it was more beautiful than anything can be. It was so beautiful that nothing anywhere could keep from dancing. The leaves on the trees, the grasses on the hills and in the valleys, the waters in the creeks and in the rivers and the lakes, the four-legged and the two-legged and the wings of the air, all danced together to the music of the stallion's song. And as a friendly rain fell, a voice told him that all the universe had completed a day of happiness. He was told to behold it, as this day would be his to make. Then I was standing on the highest mountain of them all, and round about beneath me was the whole hoop of the world. And while I stood there I saw more than I can tell, and I understood more than I saw. For I was seeing in a sacred manner the shapes of all things in the spirit, and the shape of all shapes as they must live together like one being. Then again the two men of his earlier vision came in from the east, giving him an herb and teaching him about its power. By now Black Elk's breath is lightning itself, and he is pulled back through the levels of his vision, praised by the 6 grandfathers and many voices that said he had triumphed. As it carried on, he felt himself become closer to the earth, and he was reminded of the powers he'd been given. He is told, "Grandson, all over the universe you have seen. Now you shall go back with the power to the place whence you came, and it shall happen yonder that hundreds shall be sacred, hundreds shall be flames. Behold." I looked below and saw my people there, and all were well and happy except one, and he was lying like the dead, and that one was myself. And with a final song from the grandfather's spirit, and a song sung for him by the sun, he had a fleeting feeling of loneliness, but catches the great rainbow teepee behind him and the hovering eagle. Indeed, he had lived this vision for real. I could see my people's village far ahead, and I walked very fast, for I was homesick now. Then I saw my own teepee, and inside I saw my mother and my father bending over a sick boy that was myself. Then I was sitting up, and I was sad because my mother and my father didn't seem to know I had been so far away. When Black Elk returned to his body, he felt euphoric, and learned he had been sick for 12 days and had died or come very close to death. The more he thought about where he had been, he grew sad and was afraid to tell his people what he'd seen. Quote, "I knew that nobody would believe me, little as I was." He felt a glow come through his body every time he recalled his vision for a long while, but knew he was still too young to understand all of what he'd been given. The great vision brooded over his shoulders for many years, and influenced many more such visions and out-of-body experiences he would have throughout his life. Eventually he shared his visionary journeys with his father and his people, and used his vision of certain herbs to begin his path as a medicine man, where in his late teens and early 20s he healed many sick and dying people. He became a Heyoka, or a sacred fool, and achieved this role through another vigil and vision quest. For, quote, "Only those who have had visions of the thunder beings of the West can act as Heyokas." As a Heyoka, he used humor, tricks, and foolery to bring out joy in others at a time when they needed it most. There are many great stories and journeys of Black Elk, from his venture across the Atlantic, his other visions and battles, and how aspects of his great vision turned into a reality, one of them being the grim slaughter at Wounded Knee and the healing he was to do. After returning to his people from England and hearing of the Messiah Wovoka, who in his own voyage to the spirit world brought back the ghost dance and the religion that followed it, he says, quote, "Kicking Bear had held the first ghost dance, and that people who danced had seen their dead relatives and talked to them." And he speaks of being, quote, "pleasing to the powers of the universe that are one power." After telling all of his life story to John Neihardt, and often mentioning his dark times where he felt incapable of fulfilling his vision and the powers he was given, Black Elk mentions that he would like to stand on Harney Peak one more time before he dies, the same peak where he had stood in the spirit world of his great vision. This journey was arranged, and on the day they climbed to the peak, Black Elk told his son that something should happen that day if he had any power left at all. Something should happen, and it should rain. Black Elk dressed and painted himself as he had appeared in his vision long before, and in his withered old voice he sang and said, "Grandfather, Great Spirit, once more behold me on earth, and lean to hear my feeble voice. You lived first, and you are older than all need, older than all prayer. All things belong to you, the two-leggeds, the four-leggeds, the wings of the air, and all green things that live." For a long while he spoke in despair, reminding the grandfathers that they told him he could send his voice to them in such times. and John notes that it was a rare and long-standing time of drought. And finally, after the end of Black Elk's plea, John writes, "We who listened now noted that thin clouds had gathered about us. A scant, chill rain began to fall, and there was low, muttering thunder without lightning. With tears running down his cheeks, the old man raised his voice to a thin, high wail, and chanted, 'In sorrow I'm sending a feeble voice. O 6 powers of the world, hear me in my sorrow, for I may never call again. O make my people live.' For some minutes the old man stood silent, with face uplifted, weeping in the drizzling rain. In a little while the sky was clear again.